in the trilogy and maybe the last in the series. In previous videos, I've touched on the marketing before even touching the game itself. The fact they used the cover for a Phil Collins song is pretty funny, but it's all really generic. It was never as good as the Twinkle trailer, but it was never as bad as the Your Mom Hates Dead Space 2 stuff. I guess at this point it didn't really matter because I already decided not to buy the game.
You don't have to fumble around with the controls, you just do what you normally do, so...
Oh, hey, give me ammo.
Give partner ammo.
Sweet.
I love this.
Reload your weapon by saying, reload weapon.
This was in early 2013, and during this time, EA had been on a spree of mangling its own games. Dead Space 3 didn't look any different. The reveal showed co-op being a big focus, which is an odd way to end a horror trilogy. They showed off human enemies with guns and some kind of cover system. Even the necromorphs are packing heat this time around. It was going to be even more of an action game than 2 because 2 was still too scary for some people. They talked about optional loot dungeons, whatever that meant. Oh yeah, and they were shoving microtransactions in it. Yeah, a full-priced game, but they want you to buy resources in it like it's some kind of phone game. On top of all of that, it was going to be Origin exclusive on PC. Yeah, Origin. That really cool program that people were debating whether or not was spyware because they could look at your other files. I'm not buying that trash. I love the first 2 games, I haven't watched the bad animations, and I read a book, but not buying it. Sorry. These changes were made to attract a larger audience because EA needed to sell 5 million copies of Dead Space 3 for the series to continue. That's more than the first 2 games' launch sales on all consoles combined. You probably know how that all turned out, but we'll come back to that at the end of the video. I bought the game in a Humble Bundle. At least I went to charity. So let's start from the beginning of the game. Dead Space 3 starts off 200 years before the first game. Wait, the helmets unfolded back then too? Yeah, there's gonna be some retconning this time around. Why does a 200-year-old building use the same Zebra Industries lock that the Skrull space station did? If you're a person who likes consistency and little details, then a lot of these will add up. But this also extends into the main plot, so some information from the first games can get twisted around and kind of unnecessarily so. The opening is different than the other 2 games. I like that, but the change in direction becomes really clear, really fast. In every other game, Dead Space tells you to cut off the limbs, but look at this. The enemies are running at you, your rifle has a very narrow aim, and the enemies are just guys holding axes. So what if I don't aim? That was a little easier, huh? The prologue feels more like Uncharted than a horror game. Dead Space 2 also had an intense opening, but this feels a lot more like an adventure game. Ultimately, the prologue shows a centuries-old necromorph outbreak and talks about something called the Codex that could stop it all. And that's it. Now we can pick up from Dead Space 2. Our story kicks off 3 years after Dead Space 2 on the moon. The colony seems pretty bustling. Between the games, Isaac started and ended a relationship with Ellie. She wanted to continue the fight, whereas Isaac just kind of gave up on the whole thing. I can't really blame the guy. I wouldn't want to go on the adventures that Isaac goes on. In about 20 seconds after seeing him, he gets shanghaied by the government. They need to break more markers and they need his help to do it. This threw me off. I thought the government was making the markers. It turns out that almost all human colonies have a marker test lab on them, and unitologists have been blowing them up. You'd think that after Dead Space 2 they'd be a lot more careful with these things. I guess you can have all the markers in the world and still not be very sharp. To sum it up, they need Isaac's help to find Ellie. She disappeared near a planet called Tal Volantis, and she claims she found a way to stop the necromorphs. This takes Isaac to a ship graveyard and the planet itself where he discovers the truth about the markers. It's best to leave it at that for now. Let's talk graphics. The game still looks great, but honestly, I can't see much of a difference between it and Dead Space 2. With the exception of the suits, the jump from 1 to 2 was huge. I'm sure there are some subtle improvements, but nothing really dramatic. I will say that the snow effects looked awesome. Rise of the Tomb Raider and Horizon Zero Dawn have it pretty beat now, but back then I was pretty impressed by it. This is a harsh winter, and it makes for some great atmosphere. The wind affecting your suit, the smoke and fog particles, it all looks great. I'm sure John Carpenter would be proud. Unfortunately, the art direction is all over the place. The suit designs got more streamlined between 1 and 2, but they always had angular armor with visored helmets. The helmets alone became an icon of the series. You could take them out of context and people could say, yeah, that's Dead Space. So it boggles my mind why they added so much to look more like generic sci-fi. They're not horrible, they just felt more like something I'd seen before. It's like they were trying to tone down their own visual style in favor of things that most people would find more familiar. I'm not against tweaking your formula to make something look different, but if I'm being reminded of Sam Fisher, you might have gone a bit too far. The environments have a greater variety than the first 2 games, but some were clearly more inspired than others. The series did so much to bring spaceships and space stations to life. Sure, the first game especially had a lot of hallways, but it would open up from time to time. Even when the hall designs stayed narrow, they would change around the color tones, the architecture, and other little details to make all the areas feel different. 2 opened up areas even more and had some downright inspired ones. The ship graveyard in Dead Space 3 is the worst of all of these. It's mostly just similar looking hallways. I understand that they were trying to make them like old battleships or submarines with crank doors and really narrow areas, but ultimately it's not very appealing. Here's the hallway on one ship, now here's a totally different ship. They turned a few lights on, the wall paneling's a bit different on the left. Some of these areas are just straight copy-pastes of other environments. Some areas might be blockaded off or new doors will be unlocked, but it's the exact same room. If Dead Space 1 did this, it was never so blatant that I noticed it. It feels really cheap. The planet also has reused areas. Most are optional missions. That's still bad, but it doesn't feel as terrible as the ships. It's drab, dark, and rusted, and there are very few times that this changes. The necromorphs on these ships are mummified, so they have the same green-gray colors that the ships do. They almost blend into the background. On the other side, the planet has a ton of different areas. They have a nice mix of colors, space, and tone that the ship part severely lacked. I think one of the most interesting looking levels in the series is down here. Even though I just played it a few times, I can't remember much of the ship, but the planet has some things that stick with me. Being outside of the ships is neat, just nothing inside them. That being said, 3 had some pretty significant gameplay changes. The shift to action focus is pretty clear right from the beginning. Yeah, they've added a cover system, and rolling, and universal ammo. This sounds like the Crysis 2 theme. They're really trying to sell this as an action game. Possibly to make it like other shooters, they've added human enemies with guns. I don't think it's the worst idea. After all, guns can be scary. But there was always a kind of reverence around guns. I always got the feeling they would rip right through your armor. The beginning completely throws that away because you can eat bullets in your street threads. It doesn't help that their aim isn't very good, and this is on the hardest difficulty. They could have added loud, near insta-kill guns that would have added tension, but that wasn't the goal. This is a slap fight at range that most cover shooters do. It's been implemented horribly, and I'll tell you why. They didn't do enough. In other cover-based shooters, you can bounce between cover or roll to it. You can vault over objects, you can blind fire, you can also take standing cover behind walls. Well, Dead Space 3 does none of this. You can't go into cover behind a wall. Only certain chest-high objects. You only know by going up to it and aiming. You can kind of roll into cover from the front if you time it right, but it's all manual. You can't roll between cover. No vaulting either. Why? Because if you don't want to frustrate people, you would have prompts on the screen. But the series has always been about keeping all the UI stuff on the body. Sure, they could have little arrows pop out of his suit, but that would look pretty silly. So the design became pick none, you can crouch behind some boxes. This is frustrating. Look at this. I feel like I should be able to take cover behind these, but I can't. This is also why their weapons are so weak. If an area is filled with gun enemies, you can't move through it from cover to cover. So to compensate for the fact that you were probably going to get shot, they just made their weapons not hurt as much. Most of the time it was easier to forget about cover and just fight them out in the open. At least it's more maneuverable. Plus it stops me from instinctually running up to big blocks that look like cover that actually don't do anything. There's one necromorph type that uses guns, and I think that would have been fine. Forget the half-baked cover system and the human enemies, just have these. They would be a good enemy to use stasis on between their shots. They even have a cool attack where if you get too close, they throw their head at you. See, I like this idea a lot more than this one. There aren't a lot of gunfights in the game to begin with, to the point where I almost wonder why they bothered. Well, actually, I do know why. If you want to move 5 million units, make your game look like the other ones. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the promotional screenshots focus on enemies with guns. Or maybe it is, and I'm just crazy. The biggest change comes from the weapon upgrade and crafting system. There's no longer any store, just the bench. So instead of finding money, you sometimes find different resources. You also find a scavenger bot early on which can find resources for you in the background. You can put it down anywhere, or you can use a built-in radar to find a hotspot. It'll come back with a lot more stuff if you do this. You always need to be on the hunt for a hotspot. It's like having an old Nokia phone. Once it's down, it gets stuff, but I think it talks to a server first. The game will keep going, but the character will just freeze in place when putting it down. This would happen completely randomly. After a period of time, they come back to the bench and drop off all their stuff. So why do I think this needs a server? Well, you have an option to upgrade your robots. You can double the amount of stuff they carry or make them come back to the bench in half the time. And each of these is only $4.99 US. They can even get a voice pack for another $5. I don't know about that though, because resources are pretty important. If you want to craft new weapon parts, resources. Want to make ammunition or medkits? Resources. Want to upgrade stasis or upgrade your suit? You bet it's resources. At the very least, there are some upgrades and parts that can only be found and you can't craft. You can buy a weapon and resource pack to fix that problem. Yeah, see, check it out. Each pack is guaranteed to contain one Mark V supercharged weapon pack with a 50% chance at a second bonus. Wait, this is a loot box, isn't it? Those are hot right now. This was before EA and a bunch of other companies had mastered the science of making a flashy box to open. You know, you pay for the big fun event, there's lights and smoke, and there's all the flashing, you see all the stuff you get. But ultimately, it's still this. Companies have come a long way in bleeding their customers since. The good news is, unlike other games today, you don't need these. There's no cliff or progression stops. If anything, it's overall the easiest Dead Space game. This is a pretty clear case of publisher meddling. I never needed this. I don't think I ever ran out of ammo. The game uses universal ammo, so all your weapons will always work. If you want to nickel and dime people bad at games, this is the worst one to do it in. So before I go any further, I need to bring up the Alien comparison. In my Dead Space 2 video, I compared the first game to Alien and the second game to Aliens. I also mentioned that the third installments of each were disappointing. It's a comparison a lot of people make, but I think they make it like this. This is just the general idea because I don't think Dead Space 1 is a horror masterpiece. What I want to focus on is what makes 3 the bad one. If anything, Alien 3 is more like the first movie. There's only one alien, no one has guns, and it's focusing more on horror than action. Dead Space 3, on the other hand, has almost completely thrown the horror element away for the action. Their approach to the third installment is completely opposite, but there's one thing that ties both of them together: a meddling studio and a meddling publisher. Director David Fincher has completely disowned Alien 3. The script went through a ton of rewrites. The main reason Sigourney Weaver came back was because producers wanted her. Fincher agreed to their project, but they set a film release date before a single scene had been shot. The studio hounded him while he worked on it. The studio was ordering scenes to be cut and he filmed them anyways. Most didn't show up until later in the extended cut. While Dead Space 3 doesn't have as many blatant stories, there are a lot of signs that point to it. Isaac was originally going to have a split personality with a Shadow Isaac character taunting him, but that got scrapped in favor of co-op. Eurogamer published a piece earlier this year that talked about the Dead Space 3 the developers wanted. It was going to be more focused on survival horror, and big surprise, no microtransactions. That's only the stuff people have come forward with. It wouldn't surprise me if characters and plot elements were also interfered with. Remember how Ellie looked in Dead Space 2? Well, she's had some changes since then. Pretty big changes. It might seem odd to bring this up in the middle of the video rather than the end. Well, I think it's important to have this background knowledge going forward. There's only so many ways I can say this part was changed to appeal to more people before I get tired of it, and you will too. All that being said, there are two sides of Dead Space 3, the single player and the co-op. For the sake of being complete, I'm going to cover both. I have to bring it up now because co-op affects the weapons system, so I can't continue where I left off without it. So I grabbed a friend and it's time to talk about guns.
Is that Shammy Television? Can that be my intro?
Check it out.
Why do you have an energy bayonet?
Oh look, you have one too.
Oh, never mind.
You made a shotgun. Why would you make that?
What are we doing?
In previous games, your weapons were set in stone. You could upgrade them, but not change them. In Dead Space 3, you can only hold 2 weapons. The catch is they're completely customizable now. You could use a special attachment, add a damage type, and of course, upgrade the weapon. This is done with new upgrade circuits. They can alter multiple attributes at the same time, like damage or rate of fire. You can swap these out whenever you want, but each weapon frame has a limited number of slots. You have to build or find one to max that out. If you don't want to fully customize a weapon and just upgrade it, they have a big list of blueprints to choose from. The thing is, there are such a sheer number of them that it's better to just customize them yourself. If it was only a list of classic weapons, that would make sense, but here, there's just tons of them, so I wouldn't call it an easier choice. That's not to say customizing is convoluted, it's simple and intuitive. It's fun to see how many lasers one gun can have. It's a fun mechanic, but its true height is in multiplayer. You can work with your partner to synergize your weapons, or just try to out-ridiculous the other one. When it all comes together with a partner, it works beautifully. Your weaponry decides your role. For example, one player could serve as crowd control, while the other one deals damage. You fight large groups of enemies a lot more than previous Dead Space games, and they're more aggressive, so having a buddy to cover your reloads and watch your back feels satisfying. But if you really break it down, or play single player, then problems crop up. The difficulty curve is the opposite of most games, where parts in the beginning are much harder than parts later on. This is because enemies are constantly charging at you. You only have your precision weapons to deal with them. Enemies would previously lumber towards you, and even when they charged, it wasn't that fast. This was all to encourage you to aim at the limbs. The starting weapons still operate like that's the case, but the enemies have changed. When a basic slasher can cross the room in about 2 seconds, you don't really have time to precision aim. Now there is a new enemy type in the beginning that rewards aiming, but why are the other ones so off? Why did the slasher go from a common enemy type to a super lightning quick destroyer of worlds and harder difficulties? Well, it's because they're not balanced for these guns. They're balanced for these guns. Even with their buffs, once you have a custom weapon, they don't stand a chance. Even on the hardest difficulty, once you get past that initial bump, it's all over. See how stasis is freezing the enemies? You can put that on your bullets now. How about an upgraded pulse rifle that sets enemies on fire? It just gets silly. With universal ammo, your weapon's always going to be stocked up. You don't need to think about weapon supplies, just shoot what you want. The direction they were going with is all over the place. If you explore around some ships in the beginning, it's sort of like the first game. You have to aim carefully and there's not a lot of ammo outside. When you go inside the ship, there's a regenerating enemy. There were only one of these in each game before, and they were a big deal. But now you can put them all over the spaceship because they're not as deadly anymore. The player's more powerful. Taking so many limits off the player just trivializes the enemies. When you have a gun that does it all, there's a lot less frantic weapon switching or reloading. You don't need to save special ammo for a bigger enemy. You'll always have it. If you think I'm irritated because it's easier, no, it's not that at all. It's the irony of having deep weapon customization that gets repetitive. You switch between 2 weapons, each with an alt fire, giving you 4 attacks. It's basically choosing between 4 weapons. Previously you could choose between 4 weapons, but each had a unique alt fire, effectively giving you 8 attacks. They just wiped out half your options. If you bring a buddy, I guess that balances it out, but it's not the same. The weapons are still really satisfying with great impact and sound effects. Some of the new ones like melee weapons are a welcome addition. The problem is confused direction. They didn't commit to being an action game, so a lot of elements don't make sense. That thing's pretty spooky. Goodbye.
Then they started changing. Became sensitive to bright light. Just shining my flashlight would send them into a violent rage. I disabled the elevator to trap them down there. God rest their souls.
Okay, so this part has a lot of build-up. You've just gotten onto a strange planet and you heard a guy talking about locking monsters up in the basement. What was that thing?
I smell brain bait!
You're trapped in the basement with emaciated monsters, but they're blind and they can only hear you. It's dark, they're making weird noises. This is great. I wish every day looked just like this. I've got to be a careful snooper. If I make one loud noise, these bad men will be all over me. When I see one is blocking off a doorway, I throw a canister in the corner, and sure enough, he skulks out to check it out. This is tense. I'm starting to like this. I open the next door and it's over. That was 2 minutes. It also never happens again except for some optional missions and near the end of the game. I have a feeling that a lot of people don't even know stealth is an option, because you can completely obliterate them, and they drop mountains of stuff, so not committing a massacre only hurts yourself. They find you a few rooms down no matter what. I don't think anything saddens me more than wasted potential. Can you imagine if they decide to flesh out stealth mechanics instead of other stuff? Even just taking away your weapons for this one part would have made something memorable. It's a shame people can miss this. So with the game being all over the place, which is better? Single player or co-op? The good news is choosing one over the other won't really change the story. The bad news is that it really won't change the story.
Alpha Niner, this is Whiskey 250. Alpha Niner, this is Whiskey 250. Serrano, do you read me?
Jesus, Kaufman! This is hopeless!
You're like my imaginary friend.
What
Alpha
is wrong
Niner,
with the guy in the
This is
background?
Whiskey 250.
What are you talking about his face?
Alpha
He
Niner.
looks like a
this is
Cro
Whiskey
Magnum.
Take them out! This one's still alive.
I'm the only one here.
Oh, no, there I am. Am I in this cutscene in the single player thing?
No, you're not here at all. You're somewhere else.
What the fuck?
Wait, what? Why did Carver's legs just appear there? Basically, no matter how you play, some scenes are a complete mess. Some were made with co-op in mind, others single player. It's always a dice roll. If you play single player, the game will always remind you that it's co-op. 2 buttons for the store. 2 hooks for climbing. 2 buttons for this big door computer. I'll have negative space on that right side of the screen there. So you can play single player, but it just keeps reminding you it's a co-op game. You're also missing out on some story and a few levels. Dead Space 3 has a few optional missions, and some of them are co-op only. These have some interesting moments where both players will see something different. One player could see nothing while the other is being manipulated by the marker. So if you want some of the more surreal visuals, you have to play it in co-op. One player might secretly talk to other characters. It encourages you to talk back and forth to try and get the whole picture of what's happening. The developers wanted to go farther with it, but due to reasons, they couldn't. So it's very lacking. It doesn't help that the co-op levels suffer from the reused area problem I was talking about earlier. So despite being a main selling point feature, co-op can still feel tacked on at times. The weird thing is it's integrated really well into the main campaign. Some puzzles get altered so you work together, like here when I hold down the clamp while he charges it up. One player figures out a puzzle while the other one defends them. One player flies a ship to avoid debris, the other one shoots it down. Both characters have conversations where you can learn more about the backstory.
What are you gonna do when everything you care about is gone?
It does have its own set of problems. The way loading works is very annoying. Get used to the waiting for partner button when being by doorways, even when you're both right there. Also be prepared for some of the most crammed ladder maneuvering in video games. It's a lot more waiting than single player, but that's the cost of friendship. Things also break more in co-op. I don't think it was ever fully polished.
I don't have a plan for this. How are you doing, man?
I also have some reasons to believe the enemy AI wasn't tuned for co-op. He's just going.
Live your life, man.
There he goes.
He's leaving. Later, boy. He's seen enough. Okay, well.
Did he just come back out? Oh no. Oh, he's here. He's leaving again. It's behind you.
I'm down.
What's happening? Co-op's a good time. It's fun with friends is kind of an obvious thing, since if people are good enough friends, they could probably roll a dog turd back and forth and have some fun. But the mechanics are there to have a good time. I've actually played the multiplayer in this a few times with different people. It's easier to forgive the shortcomings so you can play the entire thing with someone else. If you do the optional missions, you get better guns and upgrades quicker, so it'll be an even easier playthrough than single player. I should talk about that. I've actually already covered all the gameplay issues. All that's left is story. I'm not talking spoilers just yet, but there's one part near the end that shows just how screwed up everything is. Don't worry, it doesn't give anything away. I've praised the sound design of the series in the past, but never the music. Well, there is a great track near the end, and look at this scene that goes with it.
If I don't make it, you'll get this done, right?
We'll get this done, Carver. You and me.
Yeah, but if I don't... I helped get us this far. And that's close enough for all this to count, right? I alienated my son, wrecked my family. Isaac, I killed. Is that what a good man does?
Good men mean well. You just don't always end up doing well.
This is a great moment killed by two fatal flaws. If you played single player, you're missing out on a lot of context. You never got to know this guy like the way they're talking. And if you played co-op, it's hard to be invested in this at all.
Ow, my body.
I helped get us this far.
Yeah, wait, Spider-Man kissed me. Wait, stop. Fuck off. Spider-Man kissed me.
Which one of us is going to be Mary Jane, though? I mean, you're the red one.
Oh, fucking zombie.
Is that what a good man does?
There's no best way to play this game. I give up. I try to talk about story the least in these videos, but Dead Space 3 is an exception. It's a complete mess. So this spoiler warning is unique because I'm also going to talk about the DLC. It costs $10, is about maybe 2 hours at maximum, and it's the ending of the game. This is the last Dead Space content ever put out. So if you don't want spoilers, go to here. Let the nightmare begin. Remember when the second game hinted at there being a mastermind behind all the projects? Well, they're not in this.
Isaac Clarke!
Who would have thought Elton John was behind it all? There was a runaway train, and I guess you could call Isaac a rocket man. And necromorphs do fall under the circle of life, just not very well. I did skip over some things, so I need to go back. Remember when Isaac got recruited by the government in the beginning? Well, apparently that was the last of the government. Anywhere.
Last battalion, what do you mean?
Last means last, genius, as in no more left. Looks clear.
No more left.
Yeah, no more left? Everyone in the game talks like the apocalypse is happening right now. The opening shot for this looks like Blade Runner. Look at all the traffic. You can see the Earth lit up like a Christmas tree in the back. This is just the moon. I'm not getting a feeling of this being the end times. It's a vague setup when people are telling you that everything is chaos, but it looks pretty alright. Elton John's motivations fall pretty flat. So when he causes a marker event and Isaac runs away, then what happens on the moon? Is there another marker builder, or does it need to absorb Isaac? If EarthGov is gone, then who's going to stop the outbreak? When you find Ellie in the flotilla above the planet, it turns out she's in a relationship with Norton, the man who, recruited you. I love Isaac's face, you can just tell what he's thinking. I thought you were my Home Depot dream girl, but without me, you're just something else entirely. This is supposed to be a dramatic reveal. Yet the first time I saw this, all I can think was, Why isn't Ellie the co-op partner? You can learn more about her backstory that the second game hinted at, and new players can learn more about Isaac through her. She has engineering skills, and can use improvised weapons just like Isaac. She's killing monsters the first time you see her. It just makes sense to me for a co-op buddy. I don't know. Maybe they were afraid of being called a Resident Evil 5 clone. She doesn't do a lot either. The game just wants you to be mad at Norton for being her boyfriend.
I knew you'd catch up.
Good to see you made it, Isaac. You know, maybe we should give you two some time alone, huh?
What the hell does that mean?
It means for someone who's in the past, you're awfully glad to see him.
We need him. This mission needs
Come on,
him.
we need him or you need him?
You got something to say to me, Captain?
It's bland. They made Norton completely irredeemable and he's just boring for it. His mouth is always hanging open like a toddler. He's always telling Isaac how much he loves Ellie.
I get it. You think you and her. Yeah, we'll forget it. She's over, all right?
Is this really what we have to worry about? A love triangle with a piece of cardboard? He's always wanting to run away. Oh right, when you crash land on the planet, he sells you out to Elton John. What? You see him up to something at one point, but you don't know when he did this.
All he wants is Isaac. Carver, the rest of us can go home.
Go where? I thought everything was in shambles. He then blames Isaac for Elton John wanting to kill them, even though he told Elton John where they were. To save a lot of dialogue, Norton couldn't pour water out of a boot if instructions were on the heel. So Norton draws, yelling about Ellie, and Isaac pops him.
I'm not gonna tell Ellie.
Hey, you tell her the truth.
This could have meant something if Norton was a good character and if the body didn't ragdoll during the cutscene. So Isaac tells Ellie that Buzz Lightyear will never fly again because he sold him out to the pinball wizard, and she's still upset. That makes sense, they could have been dating for a while.
You never believed in me, or this mission, or us. I had to go find someone else to help me, and now he's dead. You sabotaged it, just like everything else.
What's that supposed to mean?
Very compelling stuff. They get back together 20 minutes after her boyfriend is dead. Well, I guess that worked out. I'm skipping subplots, but it's all like this. Motivations can change in a whim. Everyone is acting stupid. I mean astoundingly stupid. There's this one part where Isaac has to assemble an alien creature out of slides. Other characters note how strange it is.
Alright, it's just a blob, whatever. How are we supposed to piece this thing together?
Then Isaac does it, and you can clearly see it's an alien being. There's really no denying it at this point.
Well, here she is. Meet Rosetta.
Where's her face?
She doesn't have a face. It's not even a she. It's an it. Rosetta's an alien.
What? What does that mean?
Are you shitting me? Did you think that was a human being? Look at it. It's not. It's clearly not. Did you guys miss the ancient mummy dragon walking in? There was the ancient giant monster research lab. You lowered me into it in a cage. I was probing it until it got mad and escaped. I thought we established aliens were here already. I'm gonna go crazy if I stay on this, so I'm just gonna tell you the secret of the markers. It turns out that Tal Volantis is not the marker homeworld. It was inhabited by another race of aliens who were also looking at them for their energy needs. It turns out that convergence is the process of all the necromorphs combining together into a moon. The aliens then built a device that froze the process, hence why the planet's a frozen hellhole. Markers didn't generate power, they were just power relays for these things. So the use of markers and the rise of civilizations everywhere are just the reproductive cycle of an apex predator. I love the concept of it. Maybe this was always the plan. The good news is that playing the games back to back, nothing really stuck out as being a retcon here. Everything from the beginning lined up with this. Things only got confusing when you factored in the sovereign colonies being involved, but I'm not even going to touch that. As far as markers and monsters go, these are satisfying answers. You just have to sit through a lot of bad character drama to get here. This makes going through the alien city in the final levels impactful. This is an alien race that lived on an ocean world, a long time ago. It's completely unknowable. Their greatest achievement was managing to delay convergence, not stop it. Their ruins are dark and filled with strange architecture and markers. The slog of the early game felt worth it to see this. You learn a bit of their dialect to open doors. It gave me a feeling like I was playing a different game entirely. But then reminders would come and it's like, yeah, this is Dead Space 3. I love this city though, it makes the journey worth it. Then characters come back and things get silly again. Carver's big moment was telling Isaac to finish the mission no matter what. So he gives Elton John the key to turn the machine off and end all life in exchange for Ellie. So the moon wakes up. That was a really bad idea. The planet is being sucked up into this thing. The lighting and shadows are going crazy. Everything built up to this. Then Isaac says something that makes me laugh every time.
Carver! I see the machine! We have to get it before the moon does!
Copy that! I'll meet you there!
Something clicks in my brain when Isaac says grab it before the moon does. He's gone from fixing antennas to fighting a moon monster. The sense of scale is all off now. So Isaac reaches the something and then fights it. I don't know if this is better or worse than the final boss of the last game. You get eaten by a giant monster earlier in this one, so the bar's already been set too high. Yet there's also the boss fight against the giant drill, so I don't know anymore. Somehow the machine still works and Isaac freezes it again. The moon has crashed into the planet, but the marker signal has stopped. There's a scene after the credits that implies Isaac is alive, but we have the DLC, so we know he's alive. Don't worry, it's gonna be quick.
That doesn't make any sense! Isaac, you activated the codex. The moon fell. We fell.
What about the alien machine? It froze the planet. It pulled a moon out of the sky. We don't know what that technology can do.
What? What does that mean?
After miraculously surviving a moon ramming into a planet, they decide to get off. Isaac and Carver keep saying that it doesn't make sense, so I can't really complain about it. While they did kill the moon, things may not have gone exactly as planned. Try taking that out of context. There are strange visual effects, hallucinations, and reskins of previous enemies. They're clearly trying to make it scary again, which is appreciated. The other moons are awake and wanting to feast on humanity. They said it, not me.
Awake and hungry. But where is it? Take us home, Isaac. Make us whole.
The visuals are gorgeous. I think giving the moons a voice is a mistake if you're going for Lovecraftian horror, but it's still good presentation. Unfortunately, you have all your equipment from the main game, and your memories of it. It's hard to pick this apart because they were given the budget for a $10 DLC to finish up the series. So once again, there are a lot of reused areas.
They are hungry. They are coming. They are hungry. They are coming.
Sometimes I wonder if this entire DLC is just potshots of their publisher. The first half of the DLC is escaping the planet. The screen can get pretty frantic, which is a nice change of pace. The second part is reboarding a ship from earlier to get a hyperdrive, or a shock drive, whatever it is. Unitologists are already aboard. The absence of Elton John has not made their hearts grow fonder. Going back to weird space cults is a good change. These are all good changes. I wish there was more of it. What really stings is that this seems like a glimpse of what the main game might have been like if they could have done what they wanted with it. Yeah, it still has some problems from the main game, but look at it. Imagine letting this team go nuts. Anyways, it all ends with Isaac and his friend escaping back to Earth. Isaac is having trouble getting a signal, so Carver tries to call EarthGov Command. At this rate, I've given up trying to understand what's going on with that. So at the very least, Visceral could give them a happy ending. It's a cliffhanger? Oh god. So that's Dead Space 3, and wow, what a shift it did. I think the single player experience is overall the worst in the series. I wouldn't call it a bad game though, I think it's alright. I'd bump it up even more comparing it to co-op games. I think if someone picked it up fresh, not knowing anything else about the other games, they might like it even more. I've just been spoiled. I've heard a lot of people say this game is horrible, but I don't think it's that bad. But when a series falls from amazing to okay or good, that can make it seem a lot worse. That's what Dead Space 3 is. It's an okay game after some really spectacular ones. As far as sales go, Dead Space 3 had the strongest opening week of the franchise. It also had the largest second week drop. Week 2 sales went down something like 80% average across all platforms. It sold around 600,000 copies in its first month, which wasn't anywhere near the 5 million EA wanted. So now the series is dead, and Visceral's dead. They've had quite the ride. I'm not sure how to recommend Dead Space 3. It's probably the best dollar I've spent on one game. I'm just not sure about it now, because all the money goes to EA, Visceral is dead, and the DLC ending is $10. So it's in a weird place for me. I have no idea how to feel about it. Maybe I'll figure it out one day. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the wait, but it's been pretty hectic. This is going to be the last review video for a while. I'll have a channel update and FAQ video out in a week or so. I'll be able to explain more then. So until then, maybe try Dead Space 3. Or don't.
David Bowie?